Hi, I'm Lisa Poff. I'm Program Coordinator with the Indiana Deafblind Services Project, and I'm here today with Annie Hughes. She's with the Visually Impaired Preschool Services in Indiana. Hi, Annie.
Hi.
Thanks for being here with us.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
So we just want to talk to you a little bit, ask some questions, or some follow-up to some of the things we did yesterday. We talked yesterday about different strategies when working with children with combined vision and hearing loss. And I wondered if you thought of any time when you had used any one of those strategies with a child, and when you knew that they kind of got it, when they really understood what you were trying to do.
Sure. I'm thinking about a little boy that lives south of Indianapolis, and yesterday in the training there was discussion about communication and about using concrete objects for communication, and this was a little one that things were just handed to him, and my efforts were to begin to show his family and his nurse that he needed to begin to make choices and communicate those choices. So we started developing some fun play routines that we did. One of them involved a little paint roller, because he was a sensory child. He loved the feel of the wind and feel of things. So one of the things was a paint roller, which I would roll with kind of deep pressure, and he loved that. So that became the symbol for the paint roller game. And then I had a big aluminum pie tin, which I used as a fan, because he loves moving wind. So we would fan, that was another symbol. And I had a number of symbols. It happens that I'm mentioning those two because those were his favorites. So at first, I'd have a least favored object with a very favored object. But we got down to the point where he'd have to pick between his two very favorites, and then I knew he was really choosing. And so I would put them up over his head in a place where he could see. He had to turn his head because he had very limited vision and also was hearing impaired. And I would offer those up above him, and then he was to touch the one that he wanted me to do. And he got, after a while, with repetition, and it took lots of visits to build up to this, he was able to touch the one that he wanted, and then I would do it, and I would count in my head to 30, and then I would stop, and then we'd do it again. So it also happened that the weather, winter ended, and spring came, and we were working. I wanted him to enjoy the amazing sensory-rich environment of outside. And so his family had a little curved tent. And so the sun was pretty hot and he burns pretty easily. So we would put the little tent up, and then I would take him outside for our visits. And one of the days I had taken him outside, and at first we weren't using those objects outside. So then one of the days I took those objects out and I brought them out to show him. And immediately he threw a big hissy I tried to put myself in his head and figure out, why is he all of a sudden upset? He always loves this. And then I realized he thinks we're going to go in. And that because he's so used to doing these inside the house. So on purpose, I put him down lower so he would bump on purpose one of the choices, and then I immediately started doing the roller. And then when he realized, oh, I can communicate outside too, I don't have to go inside to use these object choices. So then we went, and once he realized that, then I realized, this kid gets it now. We can use these objects to communicate whether we're inside or outside, and he's able to use them in new locations, which really is mastery, when you can apply a skill in different settings. So that's my story.
Oh, that's so neat. Yeah, that is so neat. I like hearing that. And we talked a little bit, this reminds me then, we talked a little bit about incidental learning yesterday. And how do you explain that concept to your families when you go see them?
Well, I made up kind of a corny story. It even has a name. It's called the Blue Bowl story. And so I say to the families, let me illustrate incidental learning. And I'll say, okay, you're in the kitchen, and we'll say, let's put your child in a high chair, and this is a child with maybe very low vision or totally blind and some hearing loss. And then we'll put another child the same age next to them in the high chair. And I'll say, now, it's the end of dinner. You're both up, wiping off the table, clearing away the dishes. And Dad says to Mom, hey, babe, you want to put on a Disney movie? Let me make some popcorn. And then he looks around and goes, where's the blue bowl? And the mom says, well, it's on top of the refrigerator. So Dad walks over to the refrigerator. He reaches on top. He grabs the blue bowl, pulls it down, and he goes and makes the popcorn. Now the child with perfect vision and hearing just had 4 incidental lessons. And that was only a little 10-second interchange. The first is the object, the label object of the refrigerator. Daddy walked directly to the refrigerator. The second is the concept on top. I'm starting to understand what that might mean. And the third is a bowl and what a bowl can be. The child's used to a little bowl with raisins or Cheerios, but this is big. So maybe a bowl has to just have a scooped out place. And then the fourth thing is the color blue. I have a blue shirt and a blue ball, and this is a blue bowl, so I'm starting to get blue. So that child with all of their senses, working, just had 4 incidental lessons that nobody planned in that 10-second period. But what did the very visually impaired or blind child with some hearing loss get? And the answer is big Zippo. Even if they were able to hear some of the words, they weren't tied to meaning. And so I always say, now, the good news is the child can still learn all those things. But you see that the incidental things that are going on every day, every moment that a child is awake, a child with a sensory loss misses out on all that. That's my Blue Bowl story.
Well, it's not a corny Blue Bowl story. It's wonderful. It's great. That is fabulous. Thank you, Henny.
Sure.
Let's talk about a couple other things. When you go into a new family and you're talking to the parent and they have this list of things that they want their child to learn or they feel that they need help with, how do you help them prioritize those things?
Well, first of all, when you think about early intervention, the real goal is not we as professionals coming into their house ready to dump a lot of knowledge and information on them, but instead looking at them and listening to what's coming out of their mouths and trying to figure out what their needs are right now. It should be steered by what they're saying. So usually, actually on our intake form, we have a question that says, what are things you like to do with your child? What are the fun things that you love to do with your child? And then what are the things that are hard to do? And so when you hear those things that are hard for them, you try to help them. You can't give them more to do. They're already overwhelmed. They're usually going through stages of grieving. They're usually, balancing. Sometimes they've lost a job because of all the medical appointments. There are financial issues. There's a lot of stress that goes along with having a child with very significant challenges. So you're trying to find out, what can I do that will help it be easier for them and help them begin to feel some success and begin to feel like I can do this. I can advocate for my child and I can do this. And you want them to feel proud of their parenting. So I look for something that they seem to really need and then try to address that.
Kind of meet them where they are.
Yeah, where they are. Because that's what early intervention really is it's not just the child, it's the family that you're working with.
Fabulous. Thank you. Let's talk a little bit more about some of those more difficult conversations that you have. So you've gone to a family and you obviously know they have a child with a vision impairment, but once you're there, you sort of suspect that there may be something going on with hearing. and you want to maybe do a little more assessment, find out a little more information to validate that one way or the other. How do you have that conversation with the family? How do you start that conversation?
Well, you don't want to terrorize a family. So they already, every time they're seeing a doctor, they're hearing something else that to be scared of, that their child can't do, or some other problem. So you don't want to exactly say that you think that your baby also, besides not seeing, they can't hear. So what I would usually do is say, a child with a visual impairment or a blindness, they have to use all their sensory channels in order to learn and grow. And so it's going to be pretty important that we check out and make sure that he or she has access to all of those channels. And so I'll ask, how did the newborn hearing screening go? And were there any questions about that? And you can kind of ease into the topic and maybe suggest that would be something that they should probably check out. And of course, I can always, it's always nice to be able to call the project.
Well, thank you.
And send you their way also. So I can say, there are a lot of people. The nice thing is there are always people that can help. And let's connect you with some of those people.
Great. And, we have that newborn hearing screening. Have you run into many instances at all where they've missed?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I have. Yeah. And sometimes that involves, sometimes there's conductive hearing loss, and there's auditory processing. There are all different kinds of hearing loss. So, and that's not my area of expertise. So I would be calling in someone with that expertise or suggesting that this is something we should look into.
Annie, when you go and meet a new family for the very first time, is there not necessarily a protocol, but what do you do with that family to start building a relationship and getting started with working with that child?
Well, when you first enter the home, I always say, where would you all like us to be? And then, I want them to pick where we hold this little meeting. And then I settle in and sit down, and I don't ever reach for the child or pick up the child. I want to talk to mom or dad or grandma or whoever's there and just watch, just see what the child is doing. And I never move up close to the child at first. I keep my distance because I'm a stranger. I also, from the very beginning, try to model. I'll say, someone new came into your house. My name is Annie. I brought a big bag with lots of things in it and my ukulele. And then there's a beginning and a middle and an end to every visit. And my visits start with a hello song with my ukulele. And then we have the meat of the visit, and then we end with a goodbye song. And that way it's very clearly delineated, the beginning, the middle, and the end. And when I'm first speaking with the family, I'll say, I'm here to see this little munchkin, but you guys know this child better than anyone. You're the experts. And we always say, you are your child's first and best teacher. So you're going to teach me a lot of things. So fill me in on this little munchkin. What's going on with your kiddo? And so and I have a little form I'm filling out. I'm asking lots of questions. And also for them, it's a time to vent and share about how hard things were, and it's hard what they've been through, and I sympathize, and because I do. You've been through a lot, and I'm so sorry that this has happened to you, because this has got to be really difficult. I'm a mom and a grandma. That had to be really hard. And then we move on to, meanwhile I'm watching, and I'm laying out a black towel with little rhythm instruments and things, and I'm moving a little closer to the child and laying things out, and then asking more questions. And then meanwhile the child, if they have some hearing, they're getting used to my voice, my scent, my presence, me getting a little closer. I ask mom to come and hand them things, and then gradually I keep moving a little closer and a little closer. And by the time I've done a lot of my intake, I'm up close to the child, and sometimes I've had kids crawl in my lap. I've had kids, I don't ever make them come to me. I wait until they feel safe. That's part of not scaring them to death and letting them they have doctors and they've been through so many medical procedures. Not everybody who touches them does nice things. Sometimes they get poked and prodded. So I want them to know, no poking, no prodding, and I never make their hands do anything that they don't want to do. So I'll do some fun things in front of them and maybe play with a toy under their hand, shake it a little bit, see what happens. Sometimes turn my hand over and open my hand so that they have access to that toy. Just little things, but a lot of it is observing how they move, how they interact with objects, how they're using whatever vision they have, whatever hearing they have. That's my protocol.
That's your protocol? Great. You talked about how they're using their vision and hearing. How do you talk to the family about maximizing their use of the vision and hearing? Are there things that you particularly suggest?
Well, because I'm a teacher of the visually impaired, the first thing I do is talk about the visual process, how the visual process works for all of us, and then where along that process their child may be having difficulty. Of course, I have them sign a release to get an eye report so that then I can verify that what I'm observing functionally is also what the doctors are saying is actually occurring. But what I want them to understand is that there isn't a cookie cutter solution for every visually impaired child. Some children need more light. Some children need less light. Some children need to be closer to things. For some children, if you make it bigger, they only see a little piece of it. So there isn't one recipe for adapting materials for a child with a visual impairment. So you have to know what the eye condition is and what those needs are. And then for many eye conditions, you need to have a very clean, clear background. So if we're on the floor and the rug has lots of flowers on it, I spread out a clean black towel. And I show the family how this toy doesn't show up very much on the regular rug. But man, if I put it on that black towel, look how it pops. Look how it shows up. Or I'll show where he didn't notice it down there because maybe his lower field is missing. But if sometimes I have a cardboard box, but if I set up a little cardboard box in front of the child and lay the black towel on top of it and raise the objects up in front of the child, now, he's noticing them. Woo! There are all kinds of little, you can show, even things like when a child, if they have difficulty with complexity, most people face into the middle of a room. But when you think about that, if you're facing into the middle of the room, you're seeing everything that's in the room. All of the furniture and the pictures and the books on the shelf and the magazines and all that complexity. Whereas if there's a wall, a white wall, and I turn that little munchkin around and face him toward the white wall, and there's nothing, and then I can hold up things and he'll see things there that he couldn't see if he was looking across a very busy, complex environment. So there are lots of little things, and nothing costs money. It's all very simple, just changing how you position the child or what they're looking at or where you're putting the visual target or where you're presenting the toys. Nothing is expensive. It's all very simple. And once they're aware of it, they begin to look at that in every room. They begin to realize, so if I want him to see something, I can do this here, or I can do this there. And we'll go from room to room, not at the first visit, but at later visits. We'll set up little areas to practice looking. If you're going to be on the changer, you're going to do that several times a day. Let's set that up so there's something for you to look at there. So those are the kinds of things.
Great. You mentioned while we were talking about the child's assessments and some of the medical records. Are there things that you do, assessments that you do, that give you more information?
Yes. I do an informal functional vision assessment with the children that I see, and I also document their vision or visual progress through over time. If the child has a processing difficulty, I use Christine Roman's CVI Essential Paperwork, which uses a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being no vision, no reaction to anything including light, and 10 being normal or near normal visual responses. And if the child has an ocular issue, I document what they're seeing or not seeing using a portion of something called the Oregon, and I use the vision section, and it's really nice because it's divided up into visual skills birth to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3. So it's kind of nice, and so that way you can kind of keep track of if there's been visual loss, if there's been a gain due to processing or surgery or whatever, or if the vision has basically stayed stable.
I know in the past
Yeah.
you were actually a vision teacher in the schools, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I thought you may have mentioned something. Was there a difference in how you did a functional vision assessment now with the little children versus in the school?
Yeah. When I was working with school-age children, I had equipment that I used, quite a bit of equipment, and I used some Leah Havarian developed some things that were symbols, and I used those for near and distance vision testing and for matching. They're called the symbols, and there were 4 different symbols, and you could get a good read by playing games with a child. You could actually get almost an acuity. But little babies and toddlers are not matching. So you have to use different size items and different color items at different distances. Everything you're doing with the little ones is more functional. At one time I tried to use what are called grading paddles, but for some of the kids I have a real hard time determining, and I've talked to some pediatric ophthalmologists about it. They have a hard time using those too. So that made me feel better because I was having a hard time seeing if I could get any acuity readings using those. So I basically use functional objects and experience and information from the families about what they've noticed because they know their children better than anyone. So with interviewing them, observing over time in different settings, in different lighting, you can get more and more functional vision information.
Well, Annie, we've talked about several different strategies today, and I wondered if there was a particular one that you found to be really effective or you've used a great number of times.
Yes. The one that I like the best, and our amazing presenter yesterday talked about it at length, is what I call wait time. And what we have to realize is that as adults, most of us have pretty intact, neurological systems. We can process lots of sensory input at one time. Lots of things can be coming at us, and we can take it all in and analyze it and figure out how we want to react to things. But some of these little ones with these very significant challenges, processing is one of their biggest issues. And so what to us seems like a reasonable amount of time with our intact processing system is not the case with these little ones. So for me, whenever I think about asking a child, let's say I'm having them make a choice, and I have 2 concrete objects and I'm wanting them to choose. And I'm saying, choose, which would you like? And maybe I present it on a black piece of Velcro on a little tray, and I'm showing hand under hand, this is one option, and this is one option. And I'm waiting for them to feel it and look at it. Then I pull their hand back, and then I say, choose. I hold their hand and say, choose, which would you like? And then I take a little vacation, and I wait. Because in order for them to make a choice, first they're going to have to remember, what the heck were those things that I just was feeling? I can't see them very well. What were those things? And what do I really want to do? And I have to think about that for a while, and then There's motor planning that has to come into play. If I'm going to indicate what thing I'm going to pick, then I'm going to have to plan to lift up this arm and move this hand. That motor planning takes a lot of mental energy and time, and then indicate my choice. So I count to 30. I take a vacation and I just wait. Because a lot of times the problem is people don't wait. And then, right about the time that the child was ready to muster up a response, the choices are whipped away and they go on to something else. And the child didn't ever get to communicate what they wanted. And even if I've counted to 30 and I've taken my little vacation and I've waited, I'd try again. Here's your first choice. Do you want this? And give them time to really explore it. And then, or maybe you want this. Give them time to explore it. And then pull the hand away, but not quite as far maybe, so they don't have as far to go. And then, again, I put my hands, which? You choose which, And then, again, wait. Just wait. Give them the honor of the time they need to muster a response, to decide. If after doing that several times they still haven't responded, then you can help them make a choice and say, well, since you're having a little trouble deciding, let me help. How about if, and then take their hand and move it. I want and lay their hand and then verbalize what that choice is and then do that. But waiting, if you wait, a lot of times they will choose or they will respond. And that applies to almost anything, whether it's a visual response or a motor response or, if you want them to make a sound with their mouth or anything that you're asking them to do, give them the courtesy and the dignity and the time to answer. So anyway, I think waiting is one of the most important things to remember. Don't be impatient. It's a busy, hurried world out there, but not for this little one. This little one needs you to gear down, and give time for a response.
And you were so right about all of that. It was fabulous. It's just hard. It's hard for all of us to remember to do and think about.
Well, most early interventionists, come on, some of them are young mothers, they're balancing, they have to be, the next visit is at a certain time and they have to do 9 million things and they're thinking of their kids and what I'm fixing for dinner tonight. They have a lot of things, and so they're used to doing multitasking and doing 3 things at a time. But with these little ones, it's better to do less and make real progress than to do a whole lot of things that really don't have meaning to that child.
One more thing. You had talked about resources and what you do with parents in terms of providing them with information and asking them to do a little self-study. How do you handle that with families?
Well, again, you kind of steer how you provide resources by looking at what the family, one of the things we ask is, do you have an email address? And if they don't, then, do you have access to a computer? And if not, email. A lot of families lots of young families like to search the web. And that's wonderful. The web has lots of amazing resources, but not all of them are worthy of their time. And just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's true. So one of the things that I like to do is provide them with quality sites to go to. And I'll list several sites for them that I think might be good. Sometimes it's vision specific. If it's a child with albinism, I'll want them to go to NOAA. If it's for each child, there are going to be different sites that are good for them to use. Also, sometimes I think whatever we've talked about during a visit in terms of resources, it's nice to leave behind a printed resource that kind of says the same thing that I said while I was visiting. That's like a reminder, so they can share it with grandma or reread it and go, oh, yeah, that's what she was talking about. So printed resources, I like those, and I like web resources, and well, there are just a variety of ways that you can get information into a family's hands if they have an iPad, and sometimes they're playing on their iPad or they're playing on their phone. You know, I have a list of web apps, or apps that are good for a child with a vision impairment that might be useful to them. Those are the kinds of resources that I usually share, in addition to agencies and national and international resources that might be good for them.
One more thing, I guess. We talked earlier, you had a routine when you show up at the home.
Yeah.
You didn't tell me, though, when you introduce yourself to that child, do you have a particular item, object, sign that you give that says this is Annie, or is it the song itself?
Always in my classrooms, and always ever since I've been in homes, I wear bracelets. I'm just the bracelet queen, and I usually pretty much wear the same ones, and they make noise and jingle, and most of the time the kids realize that I'm wearing them. Also, for some of my totally blind children, I know there's a particular scent that I wear that is consistent. I've used the same one for years, and back even in classroom days when we'd make smelly jars for fun, there was a Mrs. Hughes jar which we'd squirt the scent into, and that's Mrs. Hughes. So there are, besides the song and the way I don't initially touch a child until they're ready to come to me, and then there are everybody, when you touch or work with a child, everybody touches and holds a child a little differently. Each parent, that's one of the things I tell the parent, they know your secret code. You each have a secret way of holding them. They know, and you have your own special scent and your own special, even if a child has a hearing loss, there's a vibration when you speak or talk to a child that they can feel. So, yeah, I guess you could say the bracelets and the scent and my songs. That's how I'm Annie to them.
The aura of Annie.
Yeah, yeah. It's a little scary.
Oh, well, it was fabulous talking to you today, Annie. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure.